So, for the past 5 or 6 classes, we were discussing about insects and their damage and all. We discussed about various insect pests damaging stored grains. Today, we will move on to another set of pests which cause very huge damage in storage, that is rodents. So today we will see what are the rodents damaging stored grains, and then what are the characteristics of a particular rodent, and hopefully we will start with a bit of rodent management, and tomorrow we will complete the management part. So 2 classes are needed for rodents and their management. So some of this you might have studied during, at least those who had their UG in College of Horticulture must have learned it very well from our head, Dr. Manichalavan, because he is an expert in vertebrate pest management and he takes it pretty nicely. So for others, I don't know how those classes have been covered during your UG or PG programs. But anyway, we'll go through it a bit quickly, and it's really interesting because rodent management, rodents and their management. One thing is, unless and until you understand the behavior and physiology of rodents, the management won't become effective. It's not like insects. You have to very well understand the behavior because it's extremely, all the vertebrate pests, unlike insects, all the vertebrate pests has the ability to learn things. That's why whatever be the management practice we adopt to manage, say, vertebrate pests such as wild boar, they will overcome it maybe 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. None of the tactics have a long lasting effect. It doesn't last long. Take the case of elephants, another vertebrate pest. Humans have tried to ward off elephant damage in their crop fields by innumerable ways. I'd seen a scenario when I was working in Malappuram, wherein the eastern parts of Malappuram districts is heavy problem of this um, elephants, wild elephants. So, in order to separate out the forest area from the cultivated area, forest department constructed electric fences around the crop field, around the forest area, so that elephants don't come outside the forest area into the cultivated area and destroy the crops. So few months it was fine. Elephants didn't find out any way for crossing this electric fence and reaching out the cultivated areas for food. But afterwards, what they did was, when they come over near the fence, they will fetch a dried twig from somewhere, a dried tree or dried branch or anything. And once they approach the electric fence, they strike this electric fence with very high force using this dried twig or dried branch or dried tree. See, if they didn't use any fresh twig or branch, because if they use a fresh twig or branch, it will get electrocuted. Instead, they use the dried one, so they won't get any electric shock. And once they strike the fence, the wires will be broken, the power will be gone, and the fencing is gone. It gain access to the cultivated fields. So all these mammals have the ability to modify their behavior, to adjust their behavior to overcome whatever management strategies we adopt. So that's why rodent management or any vertebrate pest management should involve a fundamental understanding of the behavior of the animal which we intend to manage. Otherwise, it won't succeed. So, the first part of the lecture, we will cover a bit about the behavior. Then only we will go into the kind of rodents which is commonly seen, and then we will move into the management part. Okay, I will share my PPT. Okay, I'm hoping it's visible. So the economic importance of rodents is it's not just the quantity of the food grains they consume. It's not that they consume a huge quantity of food grains and lead to heavy loss of food grains. No, the major problem associated with a rodent is that it will spoil the food more than what they eat, what they consume. Because if there is any rodent fecal pellets there, that is rodent droppings, if they urinate it, if they damage the grains, the presence of hairs of rodents, etc., all those make this food unfit for consumption. Because rodents, when we discussed about the rodents in the introductory part, we are discussing about rodents move about in all the filthy areas surrounding the storage godown, and once they come back into the godown for feeding the grains, they transmit disease causing organism into the grain. So it's not that what they consume, the spoilage caused by rodents are huge. So that's the economic importance of rodents. It will, rodent droppings will be there, it may urinate, it can damage the grain, and hairs, all those things make the grapes unfit for consumption. It can act as a carrier of pathogens. And another thing is that it can destroy articles and structures that you might have seen. It can burrow holes under the foundations of the building. It can cause damage to doors, windows, etc. That you might have observed, at least in your hostels. Have you observed rodents burrowing, making holes on the doors and entering into your rooms and all? Usually, hostels are a good breeding ground for rodents, because most of the time you keep your leftover food in the waste basket, so it serves as a source of food, and rodents get multiplied. Have you ever seen rodents making holes on the doors, windows, etc., and gaining entry into the buildings? At least you might have seen rodent burrows under the foundations of the building. No? Yes, yes. Okay, so they can damage the structures. So I told you, the first instance I told you, if you want to manage the any vertebrate pest effectively, you have to study its behavior thoroughly. Then only we can manage them effectively. So first we study the major behavioral pattern of rodents, so that we can effectively manage it. The first and foremost thing is it has the ability to dig burrows, so that everyone of us know. Rodents can burrow into the soil, so it is fossorial in nature. Another thing is that it prefers dark, so it is nocturnal in nature. That also is pretty common. It is fossorial, it is nocturnal. Another thing is that it has exploratory habit that you might have observed. It move about, wander about the rooms, wander about all the areas in search of food. So it has exploratory behavior. It explores for any source of food. Then the another behavior, the fourth behavior that is extremely important to understand, that is thigmotaxis. Thigmotaxis means if you have observed any rodent moving in a room, it will not move through the center of the room. If you are entering a room, usually human beings, what they do, they open the door, they enter into a room, they move through the center part of the room. What rodents do normally if they enter a room? Whether they once they enter into a room, whether they move through the center of the room like any other animal and all. If you have a keen observation, you might have observed close to the wall. Yes, excellent. So it's normal. Rodents doesn't move through the center of the room. Once they enter the room, it moves along the side of the wall only. If you remember any instance in which you might have observed the movement of a rodent, it will move always. It moves along the side of the wall. That is, rodents have the habit of moving along the side, aligning to any vertical surface. So if you have a wall like this, it will move on the side of the wall. If you have a bund in the field, in the rice field, if rodents are moving in a rice field, it prefers to move along the bund. If this is the bund, it will move along the on the side of the bund, not top of the bund. Humans, what if they have a paddy field, if you have a bund in the paddy field, we usually walk over the top of the bund. Rodents don't do it. Rodents move along the side of the bund. So that behavior is called as stigmotaxis. It moves it moves aligning any vertical surface. That's one critical behavior which we have to understand and exploit for management of rodents. And the next is neophobia. Neophobia, as the name indicates, neo means new, phobia means fear. So it has rodents are neophobic behavior. It varies from different species, one species to another. That means it may not take up any particular thing, a new thing, for a certain period of time. That's why we usually say we have to go for a technique called as pre-baiting. That means because of the neophobic behavior, if you are keeping some food containing any rodenticide for baiting the rodents for the initial 1 or 2 days or 3 days, depending upon the species, rodent may not feed on it because it is neophobic. So you have to familiarize that bait with the rodent, then only it will pick up. So that's why it is called as, we use a technique called as pre-baiting, wherein for the first few days we will keep a food material without any bait material. There is another factor for this, and that is the next thing that we will discuss, that is bait shyness. So first thing is neophobic. That means the rodents doesn't usually pick up anything for if it is presented to them for the first time for a few days. So it won't pick. It is neophobic. And the second thing is bait shyness. Bait shyness I will discuss in the next slide in a bit elaborate manner because that is one critical factor we need to understand. And the next behavioral character is rodenticide resistance. That means just like insects evolving resistant towards insecticides, rodents also have the ability to develop resistance against rodenticide. Then the next behavior is reproductive bouncing that we will discuss after a few minutes. And then migrality, that means it can migrate from one area to another. So major behavioral features of rodents are fossoriality, nocturnality, exploratory behavior, technotaxis, that means it move along the aligning the vertical surface, then neophobic in nature, that means it doesn't touch any new thing, then bait shyness that we'll discuss in the next slide, it has the ability to develop resistance against rodenticides, then reproductive bouncing that also we'll discuss later, then it has migratory behavior. So coming to bait shyness, what will happen is that whenever this is especially with respect to a particular kind of poisons called as acute poisons, which is used as rodenticides. So I will explain this with an example. So you went out for a food, or nowadays you can't go out for a food, so you ordered a particular food in Swiggy or Zomato. So you had the food, but next day you had some stomach complaint. So what you will first thing? What is the food which you have taken other than the normal food? Normally, home cooked food you might be taking, and then you'll think, what does cause the upset of the stomach? What is the reason behind it? Then you may realize that yes, I have taken a food from such and such hotel through Swiggy, so that may be the reason I got stomach upset. So the next time when you order for food, you will try to avoid that particular restaurant or food outlet because you remembers that yes, I got a stomach infection because of the food from that particular hotel. But after a few months, so one of your friends suggests you that yes, that food from that particular outlet has improved, it is excellent. Then you may try it again, whether it's fine or not. So this is some kind of a behavior which we see in rodents also. So what will happen is that if you are keeping a food material baited with the rodenticide, especially acute poison like zinc phosphate, so it has a behavior called neophobia. That means it doesn't usually accept any new thing. So if you're keeping a food material on the day one itself containing zinc phosphate, it it has another behavior, exploratory behavior. So it tries to explore it, takes a small bite of it, of the bait which we have kept, but it doesn't consume the bait fully, the poison bait fully. So what will happen is that consumes only a little bit of the food containing this poison. And this little bit of food containing the poison is not sufficient to kill that rodent. But that little amount of poison along with the food will cause some adverse reactions in the stomach of the rodent. Some burning sensation in the stomach of the rodent. Then just like human beings, rodents also study what caused this upset of stomach, what caused this adverse reactions in the stomach. And they will realize that yes, yesterday I took a small bite of a new thing which was kept somewhere, and that might have caused this adverse effect. And what will happen is that rodent will avoid those food material for a certain period of time. It varies with species. There are certain species which remembers that particular food material which caused stomach upset for about 3 months. That means for if you keep that poison in that particular food material for the next 3 months, rodent will not take it up because rodent has already registered in its memory that yes, that food has caused some adverse effect on my stomach, so I should not taste it again. I should not explore it again. But after a certain period of time, it changes. It forgets, just like human beings. It forgets. And this period varies with different species. So for ratus, which is a very common rodent in storage, the period of memory is for about 75 days. And this phenomenon is called as bait shyness. That means it tries to avoid, it is shy of that particular bait because it has already had a negative effect by consuming that particular bait. But the one thing you have to understand is it is a temporary phenomenon. That is ratus after 2.5 months, it forgets. So you can keep the same bait after 3 months or something, so that it must have forgotten what happened about 2.5 or 3 months back, and it may take up the bait again. So did you understood what is bait shyness? Are you clear? Yes. So sublethal doses of acute rodenticide. So one thing you have to understand is This is mainly with acute rodenticides such as zinc phosphate, that is particularly with zinc phosphate. Sublethal dose, that means it consumes only very little amount of poison and it will not cause the mortality of the rodent. That's why we are using the term sublethal dose. It won't cause the mortality of the rodent. It will sublethal dose of acute rodenticide will not kill the rodent, but the minute quantity of phosphine, zinc phosphate, acute rodenticide, I told it is with zinc phosphate. It releases phosphine in the stomach and it will give stomach disturbance. And the rodents will associate this disturbance in the stomach with the bait material they consumed, and they will avoid that food material. That is bait shyness. Okay. Coming to the next term, which we will discuss, is reproductive bouncing. That is another particular behavior of rodents. So it's in human beings and other mammals. It's what happens is if the gestation period or the pregnancy period is 9 months and 9 days, it is constant throughout. It doesn't change unless and until we have you have a medical emergency. The pregnancy period or gestation period is the same 9 years and 9 months and 9 days. But rodents has the ability to change their physiology according to the availability of the food. Normally, in the case of human beings, the sex ratio is 1:1. So, just like human beings, rodents in the normal breeding scenario, the sex ratio is 1:1. There is one for one female, one male will be there. But there is a phenomenon of abnormal breeding when there is plenty of food available, wherein the sex ratio, it can alter the sex ratio, wherein there will be two female for every male produced. So that is the advantage. That means if you have two females for every males means it breeds quickly. The population increases exponentially because the number of females increases. Females are more compared to male. And in the normal breeding scenario, average litter size, that means the number of offsprings per birth, is normally 6. But in an abnormal breeding scenario, the litter size increases to 20. That means about threefold increase in young ones produced per birth. So the litter size increases. Then next phenomenon is postpartum stress. That means after giving birth, that particular female mm, can become pregnant only after 90 days. That is postpartum stress. After the pregnancy, it became pregnant. It can become pregnant again only after 90 days. That is in the normal breeding scenario. But in abnormal breeding scenario, a female rodent can become pregnant just after 2 days of giving birth to their young ones. So every short, usually I'll discuss it with after the next point is also discussed. So the thing is that in abnormal breeding, the sex ratio changes, which is favors females. The number of offsprings produced changes, and quickly it can produce next generation. And the gestation period or the maturity period, that means the number of days required for the young ones to mature. It is 90 days in normal breeding, but in abnormal breeding, the young ones become mature in 2.5 months, 75 days. So what you see is that all this, the change in sex ratio, the increase in litter size, and the decrease in postpartum estrus period, and the reduction in the maturity period of young ones, all this lead to an exponential growth of rodent population in reproductive bouncing phenomenon, especially in abnormal breeding phenomenon. So, what contributes to this reproductive bouncing? Have you ever read about any outbreak of rodent population in any part of our country? Have you ever read? No. Outbreak of rodent? No. Usually it happens in routinely in northeastern states, Assam, Meghalaya, Manipur, Tripura, etc. Because they have a huge area of land, forest land occupied with bamboo. Bamboo is a major tree in forests of northeastern states. So this bamboos, usually for large tracts of land, there will be a single species of bamboo, and each species of bamboo will flower at a particular point of time. Some flowers after 12 years, some after 15 years, some after 20 years. So what will happen is that vast stretches of land, forest land, will be occupied with a particular species of bamboo, and this bamboo will flower simultaneously. Together it will flower. So maybe hectares together there will be a single species of bamboo, and all these species of bamboo flowers at a particular time. And the seeds of bamboo, it's a cereal, not it's a gramineous kind of thing. So the seeds we can consume, humans also consume. So these seeds, once it flowers, once the flowers dry up, all the seeds from this hectares of bamboo area falls on the ground, and these seeds act as a food source for rodents. So that means vast stretches of land, bamboo will flower. It will be the entire area will be covered with bamboo seeds. There is plenty of food. So the rodents switch over to abnormal breeding. So there will be huge outbreak of rodent population. That's the scenario where normally our country observes this phenomenon. And I have heard about a scenario in, so no, many of students from Andhra is here. Krishna and Godavari districts of Andhra. I don't know whether it is in Andhra or Telangana. The erstwhile Andhra Pradesh. So in that once a large stretch of area, this cultivated a pulse crop. I don't know which pulse crop, black gram or something. And by the time it started flowering, there was heavy infestation of mosaic incidents. Heavy infestation of mosaic, and the yield was extremely reduced. So the farmers abandoned the crop and didn't harvest the crop. So you might have observed that even if the crop is infested with mosaic, any virus and all, it yields a little. Though it may not yield very economically, at least it produces some flowers, some pods, some grains, etc. And as it is a legume, after some time the pods opened, all the grains started falling into the ground. So vast stretches of area, farmers didn't harvest this pulse crop, and the crop field was covered with fallen grains from this whatever left over on the crop. So this source of grains acted as a trigger for a abnormal breeding in rodents in that area, and there was a heavy outbreak of rodents. And this Krishna and Godavari districts, what is the importance of Krishna and Godavari districts? Anyone from Andhra with respect to agriculture? Anyone? Which is the major crop in Krishna and Godavari districts? No? Are you there, or are you simply logged on and left? Groundnut. Then Sushma, what you told, is it? What is it? I didn't get you. From what I understand, rice is one of the major crop in rice. Yes, rice is one of the major crop in this Krishna and Godavari district, East Godavari, West Godavari districts. So this rodents became huge menace in the subsequent rice crops in East Godavari and West Godavari districts. So that is the importance of this particular behavior, that is reproductive bouncing. Are you clear with respect to reproductive bouncing and bait shyness? Yes. So coming to the behavior, it is nocturnal, it is neophobic, it is fossorial, it is having thigmotaxis, it is having bait shyness, reproductive bouncing, migratory behavior. All those things are the particular behaviors of rodents. And how we can detect rodents, and just like insects, we need to detect whether rodents is present in the warehouse and all. But unlike insects, it is almost pretty easy to detect the presence of rodent in warehouse, godowns, or in the homestead also. One particular phenomenon by which we can detect rodents is spoilage of the grains. So if we are keeping a few bags of grains, if there is rodent infestations, rodents will make holes on the or know the bags, and it will lead to the spillage of grains. So that is spoilage. So indicates the presence of rodents. But holes on the bags, node bags, and the scattering or spillage of grains on the floor. That is one particular feature of rodent infestation. Second thing is that if there is rodent infestation, you can see rodent droppings on the floor. Rodent droppings can be easily identified. So droppings is one particular feature by which we can detect rodents. Another is gnawing marks. They try to gain entry by gnawing through the doors, windows, or any other structure. So the gnawing marks on these windows, and all is another typical feature by which we can detect rodents. And in godowns and all, if you observe clearly, the floor will be having dust. A thin layer of dust will be there. Even if you clean it regularly, because we are storing the grains, so there will be dust always. So in the morning, when you come and observe the floor of the godown, the dusty floor will have the marks of foot and tail of the rodents, because when the rodents move through this floor which is having dust, that runway marks will be there on the dust. So that is another feature by which we can detect the presence of rodents. And because of its fossorial nature, you can see rodent burrows. And if this is live burrow, that means if rodents are there in that burrow, you can see freshly dug out soil on the side of the rodent burrow. You might have observed it. Whenever there is a rodent burrow, you can see a pile of fresh soil outside that burrow. Another thing is disappearance of bait. That means if you keep a food material in the evening, the next morning if you doesn't see it, yes, it can be due to rodents. And sound of rodents, that we can easily identify. It makes sound, it make gnawing sound. All those things you can easily identify. And next thing is odor. If there is a rodent infestation in a particular godown or room, if you open that particular room, there will be a very off odor if there is heavy rodent infestation. So all those things, that means damaged bags and spillage of grains, droppings of rodents, gnawing marks on windows, doors, etc. On dusty floor, we can see runways, and because of its fossorial nature, you can see holes with dugout soil, and sometimes the baits will disappear. You can hear the noise of sound, especially in the night, and there will be a very bad odor because of rodent infestation. All these things points to the presence of rodents. So detection of rodent infestation is not that a difficult thing compared to insects, because the rodent makes its presence felt pretty easily. So that's easiest. Rodents can be easily detected. And coming to it, you might have studied in your UG course of non-vertebrate pest management or non-insect pest. There are several rodent species, but The with respect to storage, there are only four species of rodents which is important in storage, and these four species of rodents are called as commensal rodents. Commensal rodents. Commensal rodents. It is other rest of the rodents are called as field rodents. Common, they are called as commensal rodents. Anyone know why these rodents are called as commensal rodents? Anyone? Because they try to be always along human habitat. These rodents usually prefer to stay in the human habitats itself. It won't be in the field. Other rodents usually prefer to stay in the field, stay away from human habitat. But these rodents is usually associated with human habitat. The common rodents which you see in your home, they are commensal rodents because they prefer to be along with human habitat. So these kind of rodents are called as commensal rodents. So mostly we have four species of rodents which we normally see in storage. The first one is brown rat. It is also called as Norway rat or sewer rat. Norway rat or sewer. It's called a sewer rat because it is usually seen in drainage channels, in sewage systems. So that's why brown rat or Rattus norvegicus is also called as sewer rat. The next one is the very common house rat, Rattus rattus. That is the one which we normally see, the bigger ones which we normally see in homesteads. And the third one is house mouse, Mus musculus, that very small one which we see in home, that is house mouse or mus musculus. And then the larger one, the very big larger bandicoot, Bandicota indica. It is one of the largest rodents. Don't think that it is the largest rodent. Can you name the largest rodent normally seen in our country? There is one rodent which is biggest rodent in the world is something else. It is not seen in our country, I feel, but commonly seen the largest rodent in our capybara. That's what Alan I told. Capybara, it's not seen in our country. I don't think so. Capybara is from outside the country. What you normally? Tatera indica, no. Tatera indica is a field rat, small. I think you might have learned it. Another rodent, bigger size. It's normally seen nowadays. You might have seen it in the campus. Those who had a small stint in the KU campus, you might have observed it. What about porcupines? Yes, that is porcupine. Yes, that is. Capybara is the largest rodent. There is no doubt about it. But capybara is not seen in our country. That's what my understanding. Porcupine is the largest rodent which you normally see. Okay. So, among the rodents which cause damage in the storage, Bandicota is the largest one, Bandicota indica. So, how we can identify this? Among these four, the smallest one is Mus musculus. That is pretty easy to understand. There are several characters of it, how to identify it. The first one is the habit. Among these four rodent species, Norway rat, house mouse, and larger bandicoot and Rattus norvegicus or Norway rat are burrowing ones. The other two doesn't burrows. Rattus and Mus musculus is the one which you commonly see in your home. In that, they doesn't burrow. They usually lives in the roof and all. So if you see, it doesn't burrows. But these two, Rattus and Mus musculus, they are very good climbers. That's why they climb into your roof. Very good climbers. But the Ratus norvegicus and Bendicotta, they are not very good climbers. They burrows usually. And as I told, Norway rat or brown rat, it is lives in sewers or drainage channels. It has the ability to swim, so they are good swimmers. And among these three, Rattus norvegicus and Mus musculus is having a neophobia. Rattus, it has very little neophobia, very low neophobia. But Bendicotta is also having a neophobic behavior. And see the weight, the largest one, Bendicotta indica, it is about weighs about 1 kg. Mus musculus is the smallest one. It weighs only in grams, that is about 10 to 15 grams. Then Rattus and Rattus norvegicus, the range is almost the same, 100 to 500 grams for Rattus norvegicus, and for Rattus it is 100 to 300 grams. So size-wise, you can easily identify mus musculus and Bendicotta indica, but size-wise, you may not be able to identify Rattus and Rattus norvegicus. The length also for Rattus and Rattus norvegicus is almost the same, 200 mm. But mus musculus is the smallest, about 100 mm. Bendicotta indica it's largest, about 500 mm. The longevity, almost 3 years for Rattus norvegicus, Rattus, and mus musculus. Bendicotta indica it is only 1 year. Because of the neophobic behavior in Rattus norvegicus, we have to prebate for 4 to 5 days. That's what I told. If you want to manage a particular rodent, you have to understand its behavior. So its neophobic behavior is for 4 to 5 days. So we have to go for pre-baiting. Pre-baiting, we will discuss thoroughly later. For your understanding, I can tell you that pre-baiting is we will keep the food material without any poison for a short period. So for Rattus norvegicus, we have to keep the food material without any poison for 4 to 5 days. For Rattus, it is 1 to 2 days. Mus musculus, it is doesn't have much neophobia, so it's not that required. Coming to the identification characters, one thing I told, Mendicotta indica and Mus musculus, there is not much problem because Mendicotta indica is very large, Mus musculus is very small. But Rattus and Rattus norvegicus, one thing is that just a minute. If you see the head, it is pointed in the case of Rattus. But Rattus norvegicus, it is blunt. We call it as muscle. The muscle is pointed in the case of Rattus, but it is blunt in the case of Rattus norvegicus. Mus musculate is it is pointed. That's why in Malayalam we call it as chundali because of its pointed muzzle. Bendicotta indica it's slightly pointed, but in the case of Rattus it is blunt. And see the Rattus, the ear, it is large in the case of Rattus, but Rattus norvegicus it is very small. So ear is large and prominent in the case of Rattus and Mus muscular. In Bendicotta indica, it's pretty easy to understand, but it is smaller for the size of Bendicotta indica. And see the tail. That is another typical feature by which you can easily identify Rattus and Rattus norvegicus. For Rattus and Mus musculus, the tail is longer than the head and body together. That means it has a very long tail than rest of the body. But for Bendicotta indica and Rattus norvegicus, the length of the tail is shorter than the head and body together. So if you have a rodent, you can identify the species pretty easily, especially in storage. In field, we have several other rodents. Uh, Another feature is in godowns, you may not stay in the night to observe rodents. So when you come early morning, if you see any fecal pellets are also one way to identify the species because this fecal pellet they vary with the size, the shape of fecal pellets vary with species. For Rattus, it is elongated bean-shaped fecal pellet, just like the shape of a pulse. Then in mus musculus, it is small, but it is spindle shaped. For Bendicotta indica, it is oval and bulky. For Rattus norvegicus, it is rectangular in nature. So it is bean shaped in Rattus rattus, spindle shaped in Mus musculus. It is oval in Bendicotta indica, and it is rectangular in Rattus norvegicus. This is with respect to the identification of rodents. Let me start with rodent management. Now we are moving to rodent management. First part I will try to finish. We have about 10 more minutes. That's why otherwise we may not be able to complete rodent management tomorrow. So coming to the rodent management, one major thing that you have to do for rodent management is to block the entry of rodent into a godown. Identify the potential routes of entry of rodents into a godown and remove that sources of entry. So one thing is that this picture depicts which are all the sources. Branches of tree overhanging to a building. So that is one particular easy way. Rodents, especially ratus and mus musculus, they are very good climbers. They climb over the tree, reaches through the branches into the building. Then through broken windows, broken doors, through air holes. Usually we don't have much air holes over in our country, but if you visit an FCA godown, you can see air holes to provide ventilation and aeration at the base of the building. Then it can gain entry to drainage systems, to sewer system. I told you about Pratus norvegicus, which lives in sewer systems. Then it can gain entry to open windows, open doors. It can climb up the wall. We have two species of rodents which are very good climbers. Then it can gain entry under the doors. That you might have observed. Even if you keep your doors closed, if there is some space beneath the door, rodents can gain entry into it. It can gain access into any gaps in the buildings along cables and wires. That is one particular route by which rodents gain entry. uh, Cables, wires, if you electric wires, service wires, and all connecting the electric post to your home. All those things are pretty much very good source of entry of rodents. From harbor, I mean, waste materials dumped outside through cracks and holes, holes in the walls, through sliding doors. So whatever be the opening through which rodents can enter into the indoor structure, godowns at home, etc. So, in order to make the structure rodent proof, we have to construct a godown. In the case of storage, you have when you are constructing a godown, you have to make your structure rodent proof. How we make our structure rodent proof? One thing is, have you ever seen a FCA godown? Anyone? I think I have taken Ashish, your batch, I have taken you to FCA godown in Mulangunathu. I think your batch. No. Okay. I think your junior batch. I have taken them to FCA godown. So if you visit an FCA godown, so someone of visited FCA godown. What is the size of the foundation? What is the height of the foundation? Not size. What is the height of the foundation? Any rough idea? I'm not seeking the exact measurement. 1 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet. No, it's usually 1 or 1.2 meters. If I remember it correctly, the plinth, that is the foundation of the FCA godown, is usually about 1.2 meters above the ground level. That is one particular feature wherein we try to avoid it, because rodents can easily climb up, so that's why we usually keep it. Another typical feature with respect to rodent infestation, construction of the plinth, is that what they normally do is once they construct the foundation, usually we construct the foundation like this. It's about 1.2 meter above the ground level, and the floor of the go down will be hanging outside a bit, about 2 feet or 3 feet. That floor will be hanging up in front of that foundation, just like a concrete slab. The purpose is that if the rodent comes up through the plinth area, if it climbs up, and we have an extended area of the floor, just like hanging over this, so it can't move upside down over here. Then only you can climb to the top of the floor. So rodents doesn't have the ability to move like this upside down for a longer time. So it is about 2 feet or 3 feet that foundation will be hanging above the plinth. The floor will be hanging above the plinth. So that is one typical feature. And another thing is that I will try to draw it over here so then you will understand it. Uh, so if this is the foundation, this is there will be hanging like this. So consider this as the go down. So this is the plinth area, and on both sides, on all the four sides, there will be a small projection of the floor outside. And if a rodent climbs up over this plinth, once it reaches the top, it has to move upside down to climb up and reach the floor. This is the go down where we are stacking our food grades. So this is how normally it is constructed. Another thing is that whenever they are constructing stairs to climb, see, I told you it is about 1.2 meter above ground level. So laborers can't easily climb up this 1.2 meters. It is not that easy. So what they normally do is they don't constructed steps for attached to this plinth. What they will normally do is the step will be like this. The staircase, the stairs will be like this. That means there will be a gap between the stair and the floor of the godown. It won't be connected. So even if the rodents climb up through the stairs, it can't move directly into the godown. There will be a gap. That gap is also something about, there is a particular measurement for that. That's also 25 or 30 centimeters something. It's not more than 1 feet. So that's the way they normally construct a godown. So all these things make the structure rodent proof. So whenever we are constructing a rodent godown, the plinth should be above the ground level. We should keep the godown clean, because if rodents are there, there will be spillage of grain because of the damage to the storage bags. All the spilled grains should be removed regularly, otherwise the spilled grains will attract rodents more and more. And keep the grains on pallet. What do you know what is pallet means? What does a pallet means? You might have seen the bags are not stacked directly on the floor. Even in your, if you are going to any ration shop, you might have seen the gaps are the storage bags, grain bags are usually kept above a wooden structure, a wooden plank, sometimes a plastic sheet and all. Have you seen? These are called as pallets. The wooden structures above which nowadays plastic structures are also there, wherein we'll keep the bags. Usually we don't keep the bags directly on the ground, on the floor, because from the floor the bags may absorb moisture, and the surrounding area should be kept weed free in order to avoid the harboring of the rodents, avoid water stagnation, because rodents require water, so avoid water stagnation. Stagnant water acts as a source of water for rodents, and all the structure should be made rodent proof. I will discuss about it in the next class. And all the entry points should be sealed and blocked with proper material. We'll continue it in the, tomorrow. Any doubts? Okay then. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.